Death always calls at the worst possible moments. For me, it rang during my shift at the coffee shop, while I was elbow deep in dishes and trying to avoid my manager's disapproving stare. "Ruby, your mother's on the phone. Says it's urgent." Sarah held out the cordless soap suds, dripping from my hands, as I reached for it. "Mom, Grandpa Henry's gone." Her voice cracked. "He had a heart attack this morning." The industrial dishwasher behind me hissed and steamed, but I couldn't feel the heat anymore. My grandfather, the only person who ever truly saw me, was dead, just like that. "Ruby, are you there? When's the funeral?" The words came out mechanical, rehearsed, like I was reading from a script I never wanted. "That's not why I'm calling. His lawyer wants to see us tomorrow morning. Something about the will." Of course Greg would want to know about the will. My stepfather probably had dollar signs floating in his eyes already. "I have class tomorrow." "Skip it. This is family." Family. Such a loaded word in our house. Greg and his precious Madison were family. I was the inconvenient reminder of Mom's first marriage, the one that failed spectacularly when Dad drove his car off a bridge 12 years ago. "Fine. What time?" "9:30. I'll pick you up at 9. The next morning, Mom's silver Mercedes pulled up outside my apartment, right on schedule. Greg sat in the passenger seat, his presence unexpected, but not surprising. He always inserted himself into situations where money might be involved. "Ruby." He nodded curtly as I slid into the back seat. "I trust you're prepared to handle this maturely." The leather seats squeaked as I shifted. "As opposed to what, Greg?" Mom shot me a warning look in the rearview mirror. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, broken only by Greg's occasional comments about the traffic. Mr. Patterson's law office smelled like leather and old books. He was exactly how I remembered him from childhood visits with Grandpa Henry. Silver-haired, wire-rimmed glasses, bow tie slightly askew. "Please, sit down." He gestured to the chairs before his massive desk. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Greg leaned forward. "All business. We appreciate you seeing us so promptly." "Of course." Patterson pulled out a thick envelope. Henry was very specific about his wishes. He cleared his throat. "To my granddaughter Ruby, I leave my entire estate, including all financial assets, properties, and investments." The room went silent. I could feel Greg's body tensing beside me. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice tight. "Surely Henry meant to include Madison." "There's no mistake." Patterson adjusted his glasses. Henry was very clear. "The entire estate goes to Ruby, with 2 conditions. The funds must be used primarily for her education and future independence, and they cannot be accessed by anyone else, including family members." Mom's hand found mine, squeezing gently. I couldn't tell if it was meant to be congratulatory or apologetic. "This is absurd." Greg stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Henry barely knew Ruby. She hasn't visited him in months." "I visited him every week," I said quietly. "On Wednesdays, when you and Madison had your father-daughter dinners." Greg's face reddened. "Emily, surely you can't support this." "It was Henry's decision," Mom said, but her voice wavered. Patterson handed me an envelope. "Your grandfather left this for you as well. Private correspondence." My fingers trembled as I took it. Through the thin paper, I could feel the weight of whatever message Grandpa Henry had left me, whatever wisdom or warning he thought I needed. Greg's phone rang, shattering the tension. "Madison," he said, stepping out of the office. "No, sweetheart, everything's fine. We'll discuss it at home." I knew then that nothing would be fine. This inheritance wasn't just money. It was freedom, independence, everything Greg had tried to control since he married Mom. And now, thanks to Grandpa Henry, I had the power to choose my own path. The envelope in my hands felt heavier with each passing second. Whatever it contained would change everything. I just didn't know how much. Grandpa Henry's letter burned a hole in my jacket pocket during the silent drive home. Greg's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and Mom kept shooting worried glances between us, like she was watching a bomb about to detonate. The explosion came as soon as we stepped into their pristine suburban house. Family meeting. Now, Greg's voice carried that fake calm he used when he was about to lay down the law. Madison appeared from upstairs, already wearing her practiced look of concern. I took my usual spot on the edge of the sofa, as far from Greg's leather armchair as possible. Mom hovered between us, unwilling to choose sides. "This situation affects all of us," Greg began, folding his hands in his lap. "Madison's tuition at Princeton is due next month. The timing of Henry's generous gift couldn't be better." My laugh came out sharp and bitter. "Generous gift? You mean my inheritance?" "We're family, Ruby." Madison leaned forward, her voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity. "Family supports each other. Daddy's business had some setbacks this year, and your education isn't my responsibility." Greg's jaw tightened. "Your grandfather would have wanted—" "Don't." I pulled out Henry's letter. "You don't get to tell me what he would have wanted." "Ruby," Mom finally spoke, her voice soft, "maybe we could discuss a compromise." "There's nothing to discuss. The conditions were clear. Education and independence. My education, my independence." Madison's perfectly maintained facade cracked. "This is so typical. You always act like you're better than us, like you're so special." "Special?" I stood up, years of forced politeness crumbling. "I worked 2 jobs through high school, while you got a new car for your sweet 16. I earned my scholarship while you partied your way to academic probation. But sure, I'm the special one." "That's enough." Greg rose from his chair. "Your attitude is exactly why this family struggles to function. Henry clearly wasn't thinking clearly when he what? Saw through your act? Recognized what you really are." The room went deadly quiet. Mom's face had gone pale, and Madison looked like she'd been slapped. "I've tried to be patient," Greg said, his voice dangerously low. "I've tried to be a father to you. You've tried to control me. There's a difference." "Ruby, please." Mom stepped between us. "We can work this out." "Can we?" "Because it seems pretty simple to me. Greg's business is failing. Madison's about to flunk out of college, and you're all counting on my inheritance to fix everything." Greg's composure slipped for just a second, but it was enough. I'd hit a nerve. "That's a serious accusation," he said carefully. "Is it wrong?" Nobody answered. The silence stretched until Madison broke it with a sob that sounded more angry than hurt. She ran upstairs, slamming her door hard enough to rattle the family photos on the wall. "I'm going home," I said, heading for the door. "Ruby, wait." Mom caught my arm. "Just read Henry's letter first, please. Maybe there's something in it that could help us understand." "Help us understand what? That he saw through all of this?" I gestured around the perfect house, with its perfect furniture and perfectly miserable inhabitants. "That he knew exactly what would happen when he left everything to me." Greg's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression changed. Fear? Worry? Whatever it was, it vanished quickly behind his usual mask of control. "This discussion isn't over," he said. "We're family, whether you like it or not, and family obligations. Stop saying that word like it means something to you." I pulled away from Mom's grip. "Family is more than just using people when you need them." I left them standing there, Mom reaching for Greg's hand, like she always did when she chose sides. The front door closed behind me with a quiet click that felt more final than any slam could have. Outside, the perfect suburban street stretched before me, lined with perfect houses, hiding their own perfect lies. Grandpa Henry's letter weighed heavy in my pocket, but I couldn't read it. Not yet. Not until I was ready for whatever truth he'd left me. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "You'll regret this." Maybe I would. But as I walked away from the house I'd never really called home, regret wasn't what I felt. It was something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to freedom. The envelope from Grandpa Henry lay unopened on my kitchen table for 3 days before curiosity finally won. Inside, I found a single key and a handwritten note with an address I didn't recognize. No explanation, just his familiar scrawl. When you're ready, look deeper. I should have known he'd turn even death into a treasure hunt. The address led me to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. Unit 247. My hands trembled as I fitted the key into the lock, the metal cool against my fingers. Inside, cardboard boxes lined the walls, each labeled in Henry's precise handwriting. Business records, Greg Thompson Holdings, 2015 to 2022. Financial statements, correspondence. My grandfather, the quiet observer, had been collecting evidence. My phone buzzed. Another message from Mom. Greg wants to meet. Please call me. I ignored it, pulling down the first box. Inside, hundreds of documents told a story that made my stomach turn. Greg's company wasn't just struggling, it was drowning in debt. Loans taken out against assets that didn't exist. Money moved between accounts like a shell game. And Madison's trust fund, empty. I thought I might find you here. I spun around. Mr. Lewis stood in the doorway, his familiar weathered face grave. Henry asked me to watch over this place, he said, stepping inside. Make sure these records stayed safe until you were ready. Did you know about all of this? He nodded slowly. Henry suspected Greg was mismanaging funds for years. He tried warning your mother, but she wouldn't listen. Of course she wouldn't. Mom had spent the last decade convincing herself that Greg was her second chance at happiness. There's more. Mr. Lewis reached past me, pulling down a thin folder. Greg's been embezzling from his investors, small amounts at first, then larger sums as his debts grew. Henry documented everything. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers. Why didn't Grandpa Henry go to the police? He wanted to protect your mother, and you. He knew exposing Greg would tear the family apart. The family's already torn apart. My phone buzzed again. Madison this time. Daddy's having a dinner party for his investors tomorrow. Be there or else. Or else what? I almost laughed. What more could they take from me? Ruby, Mr. Lewis's voice was gentle. What are you going to do with this information? I stared at the documents scattered around us. Evidence of years of fraud, manipulation, and lies. Enough to destroy Greg's carefully constructed facade forever. I need to think. Be careful. Knowledge like this, it's a weapon. The question is, will wielding it hurt you as much as it hurts them? I gathered the most damning documents into my bag. Sometimes the truth needs to hurt. That night, I finally read Grandpa Henry's letter. His words, written months before his death, seemed to reach across time. My dearest Ruby, by now you've discovered what I've left for you. Not just money, but truth. Use both wisely. Remember, revenge is a road that leads two ways. Choose your path carefully. The next evening, Greg's investors filled our family home. Their expensive suits and fake laughs echoing through rooms designed to impress. I watched from the kitchen as Greg worked the crowd, Madison at his side playing the perfect daughter. Mom found me there, clutching a glass of wine like a shield. You came, not for him. Her eyes searched my face. Whatever you're planning. Do you know, I interrupted, about what he's done, what he's still doing? She flinched. Ruby, please, not tonight. When then? When he's burned through my inheritance too. When there's nothing left to save. Greg appeared in the doorway, his smile faltering when he saw us. Ruby, so glad you decided to join us. Some of our guests are asking about Henry's estate. Perhaps you'd like to share the good news about how you're planning to invest in the family business. I met his gaze, feeling the weight of the documents in my bag. One move, and I could end everything. But Grandpa Henry's words echoed in my mind. Choose your path carefully. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I have something else to share. The screen lit up with the first of many documents I'd photographed. Greg's face went pale as he recognized what I held. Sometimes the truth needs to hurt, but timing, as Grandpa Henry taught me, is everything. The acceptance letter from Stanford lay on my desk like a lit fuse. Full scholarship, starting next semester. Everything Grandpa Henry had wanted for me. Everything Greg had tried to prevent. My phone lit up with Mr. Lewis's message. Greg's asking questions about the storage unit. Be careful. I'd been waiting for this. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner party, since I'd shown Greg just enough evidence to make him sweat. He'd been watching me since then, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much proof I had. The doorbell rang. Madison stood there, wearing the fake smile she'd perfected over years of family photos. "We need to talk." I let her in, noting how her eyes darted around my small apartment, cataloging every detail she could use against me later. "Nice place," she said, voice dripping with insincerity. "Very modest." "What do you want, Madison?" She dropped onto my couch, crossing her legs carefully. "Daddy's having some financial difficulties. Nothing serious, just temporary setbacks. But my tuition, no. You haven't heard my proposal." "I don't need to." I remained standing, watching her facade crack slightly. "God, you're so self-righteous." She leaned forward. "You think you're better than us because Henry left you his money, because you got into Stanford." I froze. "How did you—" "Daddy has friends everywhere, including college admissions offices." Her smile turned sharp. "It would be a shame if someone questioned your application, suggested your grades weren't entirely earned." The threat hung between us like poison gas. "Get out." "Think about it, Ruby. Family helps family, remember. Or maybe you'd prefer everyone knows how you bought your way into." "I earned everything I have." My voice came out steady, surprising me. "Unlike some people." Madison stood, her mask slipping completely. "You have no idea what it's like, being his daughter. The pressure, the expectations. Poor little rich girl, trapped in her perfect life. At least I have a father." The words hit like a slap. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. "Mom calling." I ignored it. "You know what's funny?" I said, opening the door. "I actually felt sorry for you once. Now I just feel sorry for who you've become." She paused in the doorway. "Daddy always said you'd turn out just like Henry, self-righteous and alone." Guess he was right. After she left, I called Mr. Lewis. "Greg's getting desperate," he said, when I told him about Madison's visit. "The investors are asking questions. One more push, and everything could collapse. Or he could destroy my future first. Henry left you more than just money, Ruby. He left you choices." I looked at the Stanford letter again, thinking about choices, about pressure and expectations, and the weight of other people's dreams. My phone buzzed again, a text from Greg this time. "Family dinner tomorrow, non-negotiable. Time we discussed your future." The storage unit key sat heavy in my pocket. One move, and I could end this. But at what cost? Mom would never forgive me. Madison would lose everything. And Greg would make sure I paid for it, one way or another. I opened my laptop, pulling up the encrypted folder where I'd stored copies of everything from Henry's unit. Years of evidence, carefully documented. A nuclear option I wasn't sure I could use without destroying myself in the process. Another message from Mom. "Please come tomorrow. We can fix this." Fix what? The years of manipulation? The threats? The way she stood by while Greg systematically tried to control every aspect of my life? The Stanford acceptance letter caught my eye again. Maybe that was the answer. Not revenge, but escape. Success as the ultimate rebellion. I started typing my response to Greg. "Can't make dinner. Too busy planning my future." My finger hovered over the send button when another text came through, this time from an unknown number. "You're not the only one with evidence. Back off, or everyone loses." Attached was a photo, documents from Henry's storage unit, spread across what I recognized as Greg's office desk. The game had changed. Now I had to decide, fight or flight. I looked at the Stanford letter one more time, then reached for my phone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's surviving long enough to win on your own terms. Greg was waiting in my apartment when I got home from class. He sat in the darkness, a manila envelope on his lap, looking more predator than stepfather. Breaking and entering now, I flipped on the lights, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We're family. Family doesn't need to break in." He tapped the envelope. Interesting reading material. Your grandfather was quite thorough. My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. I already showed you what I have. No, you showed me what you wanted me to see. He stood, his height filling the small space. Did you really think Henry was the only one keeping records? He pulled out photographs. Me entering the storage unit, meeting with Mr. Lewis, copying documents. You've been busy. Get out. Not until we understand each other. His voice carried that dangerous calm I remembered from childhood. Stanford's a prestigious school. Would be a shame if anonymous tips about academic fraud started circulating. You're bluffing. Am I? He pulled out more papers. Your mother's signature on loan documents. Backdated, of course. One call to the police, and she faces fraud charges. The room tilted slightly. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He stepped closer. You're just like your father, so convinced of your moral superiority that you can't see the bigger picture. My phone buzzed. Mr. Lewis again. Greg's eyes flickered to it. Your grandfather's friend is becoming a problem. Did you know he's been talking to my investors? Leave him out of this. That depends on you. He placed the envelope on my table. Tomorrow morning, you'll transfer your inheritance into a family trust. I'll control the distributions, ensure it benefits everyone equally. Or what? You'll destroy Mom? Mr. Lewis? Anyone else who gets in your way? I prefer to think of it as protecting what's mine. His smile never reached his eyes. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, things get complicated. They're already complicated. I moved to the door, opening it. You taught Madison well, threatening people to get what you want. Madison understands family loyalty. No, she understands fear. There's a difference. He paused in the doorway. Noon tomorrow, Ruby. Don't make me choose between family and survival. After he left, I called Mr. Lewis. No answer. My hands shook as I tried Mom next, straight to voicemail. A text from Madison popped up. Hope you make the right choice. Daddy always wins. I stared at the Stanford acceptance letter, still on my desk, remembering Grandpa Henry's words about choices and paths. The evidence I had could destroy Greg, but he'd made it clear he'd take everyone down with him. My phone rang. Mom, finally. Ruby. Her voice sounded strange. Greg told me everything about the documents, the meetings with Lewis. Mom, how could you, after everything he's done for us? Done for us? He's threatening to have you arrested. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, sometimes we have to sacrifice for family. That's not family. That's Stockholm Syndrome. She hung up. I grabbed my keys, heading for the storage unit. I needed to see what else Grandpa Henry had left, what other weapons or shields he might have hidden. The lock was broken when I arrived. Inside, empty boxes lay scattered across the floor. Everything, all the evidence, all the protection, gone. A new text lit up my phone. Unknown number, check your email. The message contained a video, security footage from the storage unit. Greg and Madison, methodically removing boxes. Mom, standing watch outside. My own family, destroying the last pieces of Grandpa Henry's legacy. Final text, noon tomorrow, choose wisely. I sank to the floor of the empty unit, surrounded by the hollow shells of cardboard boxes and broken trust. The choice seemed clear now: surrender or destroy everything and everyone I loved. But maybe there was another way, something neither Greg nor Grandpa Henry had considered. I pulled out my phone one last time, dialing a number I'd memorized but never used. The FBI's Financial Crimes Hotline. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between fighting and surrendering. It's choosing to let the truth do the fighting for you. The FBI agent's business card sat on my new kitchen counter next to a half-empty cup of cold coffee. Agent Sarah Chen, Financial Crimes Division. 3 days since I made the call, and the world hadn't ended. It had just gotten quieter. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Mom. 12 from Madison, and 1 from Mr. Lewis's wife. He'd had a heart attack the night after my meeting with Greg. Critical but stable, she'd said. The timing felt like more than coincidence. A knock at the door made me freeze. Through the peephole, I saw Madison, alone, and without her usual perfect makeup. "I know you're in there," she called. "Please, it's about Dad." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Madison looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. "They arrested him this morning," her voice cracked. "The FBI just walked into his office and took him away in handcuffs, in front of everyone." I said nothing, watching her compose herself. "You're doing, I assume?" Her laugh was bitter. "Congratulations, you won. We're ruined." "I didn't. Save it." She pulled out her phone, showing me a news article. "Local business leader arrested for fraud. They're calling him a modern-day Ponzi scheme operator." She scrolled down. "Mom's hysterical. The bank's frozen our accounts. They're talking about seizing the house." The satisfaction I'd expected to feel didn't come. Instead, something heavy settled in my stomach. "I had to do something," I said. "He was going to what? Protect his family. Everything he did for us. For me." Her voice broke. "And now I can't even afford next semester's tuition. My inheritance sat untouched in my account. Enough to help, to fix this." But Henry's words echoed in my head. "Use it wisely." "I'm sorry about school," I said finally. "But Greg made his choices." "Right, and you made yours." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Lewis had copies, you know, of everything. That's why Dad confronted him that night." The implications hit like a physical blow. "The heart attack. Dad says he just talked to him, but..." She shrugged, the gesture eerily like Greg's. "Guess we'll never know for sure." After she left, I checked my email. The Stanford admission office wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss concerns raised about my application. 3 investment firms had withdrawn their scholarship offers. My carefully planned escape route was crumbling. My phone buzzed. "Mom, finally using text. How could you do this to us? To me?" Another message followed. "Greg's lawyer says they're investigating me too, for the loan documents. I could go to jail." The walls of my small apartment seemed to close in. I'd wanted justice, not this cascade of destruction. Not Mr. Lewis in the hospital, Mom facing charges, Madison losing everything. A final text came through, from an unknown number. "You're just like your father, destroying everything you touch." I grabbed my keys, needing to escape. The storage unit was empty now, but something pulled me there anyway. Maybe some echo of Grandpa Henry's wisdom remained in those bare walls. The unit door was ajar when I arrived. Inside, a single box sat in the center of the floor. On top, a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Your grandfather left this with me for safekeeping, for when you were ready. Sarah Chen, FBI." Inside, I found another letter from Henry, dated just days before his death. "My dearest Ruby, if you're reading this, you've chosen truth over comfort, justice over peace. The hardest path often looks like destruction at first, but from ashes, new things grow. The question isn't whether you've done the right thing, it's whether you're strong enough to see it through to the end." My phone buzzed again. "Madison. Dad's asking for you. Says he'll tell them everything if you just come talk to him." A trap, obviously, but maybe also an opportunity. I looked at Henry's letter again, then at Agent Chen's card. The path forward wasn't clear, but maybe it wasn't supposed to be. Maybe sometimes you had to walk through the fire to find out what survived. I dialed Chen's number. "I need to tell you everything," I said when she answered. "About the loans, the documents, Mr. Lewis, all of it. Sometimes hitting bottom means finding solid ground to stand on." The detention center's visiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Greg sat across from me in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller without his expensive suits and practiced smile. "You could have just taken the deal," he said, studying me through the scratched plexiglass. "Instead, you chose nuclear winter. I learned from the best." His laugh was hollow. "Your mother's being indicted tomorrow. Madison's dropping out of school. Was it worth it?" The security camera blinked red above us, recording everything. Agent Chen had warned me about this meeting, but some things needed to be faced head-on. Interesting timing, I said. Your lawyer reaching out right after Mr. Lewis woke up. Greg's jaw tightened. Lewis is confused. The medication. He remembers everything. The confrontation, the threats, how you pushed him. Allegations from a sick old man won't hold up in court. Maybe not. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. But his security camera footage might. The color drained from his face. Where did you... Henry wasn't the only one keeping insurance policies. I put the phone away. The FBI has everything now. The real question is whether Mom knew what you were planning that night. Leave her out of this, like you left her out of the fraud charges. His mask slipped, revealing something dangerous underneath. You think you've won? You've destroyed this family. Your mother will never forgive you. This family was destroyed long before I did anything. You just maintained the facade. A notification lit up my phone. Madison posting on social media again. Her latest campaign portrayed me as the ungrateful daughter, destroying a perfect family for attention. The comments were vicious, but predictable. Madison's quite the performer, I said. Wonder where she learned that. She learned loyalty. She learned manipulation. There's a difference. Greg leaned forward, his voice dropping. One phone call. That's all it would take to make this go away. Tell them you made a mistake, that you misunderstood. Your mother's charges disappear. Madison keeps her trust fund. Everything goes back to normal. Normal? I stood up. Normal was you controlling everyone through fear and money. Normal was Mom choosing your approval over her own daughter. Normal was Madison becoming a younger version of you. You ungrateful little... Goodbye, Greg. Wait. His composure cracked completely. Please, I'll confess to everything. Take full responsibility. Just help them. They're your family. For a moment, he almost sounded sincere. Almost looked like the stepfather who'd once taught me to ride a bike, before control became more important than connection. You're right about one thing, I said. They are my family. That's why I've already arranged for Mom's charges to be reduced. And Madison's trust fund, the one you emptied years ago, I'm replacing it. Not because I have to, but because healing sometimes matters more than winning. His face contorted. You think you're so much better than us. No, I just finally learned the difference between family and manipulation. I gathered my things. Henry tried teaching you that once. Maybe now you'll have time to figure it out. This isn't over, he called as I walked away. Families don't just end. No, I said without turning back. But sometimes they have to break before they can heal. Outside, Agent Chen waited by her car. How'd it go? He tried bargaining, then threatening, finally begging. Classic progression. She handed me a folder. The plea deal's ready. Once he signs, your mother's charges will be reduced to unwitting participation. My phone buzzed again. A message from Madison. Dad just called. Said you're trying to play hero with my trust fund. I don't want your blood money. I showed Chen the message. Think she'll ever understand. Understanding comes after survival. Right now, she's just trying to survive. Like all of us, I looked back at the detention center, remembering Henry's words about ashes and new growth. Maybe that's what this had always been about. Not revenge or justice, but the painful process of burning away lies to find truth underneath. Ready? Chen asked. I nodded, feeling lighter somehow. The truth might hurt, but it also sets you free. Stanford's acceptance letter sat in my bag as I walked through the cemetery gates. The morning dew hadn't burned off yet, making the grass sparkle like Henry had ordered it specially for today. I found Mom already at his grave, looking smaller somehow in her casual clothes. No more designer suits or perfect makeup. The ankle monitor under her jeans caught the morning light. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said without turning. Henry would have wanted us both here. She nodded, touching the headstone gently. He tried warning me about Greg. I was too afraid to listen. Fear makes us do strange things, or not do them. She finally looked at me. I should have protected you. You can't protect someone from the truth. A comfortable silence settled between us. filled with unspoken understanding. Then Mom reached into her purse, pulling out a familiar envelope. Found this in Greg's study while packing up the house. It's addressed to you, in Henry's handwriting. The envelope was dated 2 days before his death. Inside, a single key and a note. For when the storm passes, the truth sets us free, but love helps us heal. There's more, Mom said, her voice careful. Madison called this morning. She's struggling. Asked if you might be willing to talk. About what? About starting over, I think, without the lies. The morning sun broke through the clouds, warming the cool air. Somewhere nearby, birds argued over breakfast, oblivious to human drama. I got into Stanford, I said finally. Mom's smile was genuine, if sad. Henry would be proud. Would you? Be proud, I mean, even if I go? She took my hand, her grip stronger than I remembered. I'm proud now, scared, but proud. My phone buzzed. Mr. Lewis, finally home from the hospital. Coffee later. Have something of Henry's you should see. Another message followed from Madison. I don't forgive you, but maybe we could talk? The key in my hand felt warm now, like it had been waiting for this moment. Whatever door it opened, whatever final message Henry had left, could wait. Some truths need time to breathe. Want to get breakfast? I asked Mom. I know a place that makes terrible coffee and great pancakes. She squeezed my hand. Lead the way. As we walked out of the cemetery, I glanced back at Henry's grave. The morning sun caught the headstone just right, making the engraved words shine. Truth without love is weaponry. Love without truth is fantasy. Find the balance. Mom followed my gaze. He always did have the last word. Still does. I touched the key in my pocket. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. We reached my car, the modest used sedan I'd bought with my own money, not Henry's inheritance. Mom paused before getting in. Ruby, whatever's in that final message, whatever door that key opens, you don't have to face it alone. I know. And I did know, finally. The truth had torn us apart, but maybe truth could also put us back together. Different, stronger, more real. My phone buzzed again. Agent Chen. Greg signed the plea deal. Your mother's charges are being reduced. Time to start living your own story. The morning stretched ahead, full of possibilities. Stanford waited in the fall. Madison's olive branch hung in the balance. Mom's redemption was just beginning. And somewhere, a door waited for Henry's key. But right now, there were pancakes to eat and terrible coffee to drink. Sometimes healing starts with the smallest choices, like choosing breakfast over bitterness, conversation over silence, truth over comfort. I started the car, Henry's words echoing in my mind. Truth sets us free, but love helps us heal. Maybe that had been his real inheritance all along. Not the money or the evidence, or even the final mystery waiting behind that locked door. Just the simple wisdom that freedom and healing aren't destinations, but choices we make every day. Ready? Mom asked. I nodded, pulling away from the cemetery. Behind us, the morning sun painted everything in new light, making even the familiar look different. Better, maybe. More real, definitely. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, loving anyway, and letting the truth do its own work in its own time.